Okay, so this is our series of kind of informative and informal chats with home educated adults.
Oh, right off the
And
back of this.
I'm really delighted today that Robyn Conroy from Dublin has joined me. And I know Robyn for a long time. So this is like a chat with a friend. Robyn, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Robyn Conroy. I am an animator and designer. And I was home educated from about the ages of 9 or 10, I think, to 17. So I really like that teenage section and preteen section was the years that I was home educated, which was interesting. It was a different experience to a lot of home educated kids in that I had kind of the formal education on either side because I went to university and I was in primary school, but then secondary school
All that
mainly.
chunk of your teens was learning at home with daddy and your sibling.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess what's really different for anybody watching this who is in the home education community is that your dad was the primary educator in your home. I don't know if you want to talk a bit about what you remember about coming out of school or what home ed looked like in your house.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a structure where for all of my life it's been my dad at home as the homemaker and my mom who's bringing in the bread, so to speak. And so it's funny, I was actually thinking about it that there were a couple of kind of interviews and articles done about my dad in kind of the early 2000s when it was still sort of a novelty for a man to be the kind of homemaker. And I remember they'd often try and be getting him into an apron or like holding a tray of something. And it's just funny how even just back then that was still seen as kind of odd. And so that in and of itself was odd. And so on top of that, then him being also teaching us from home was odder again, I think. So um, yeah, I think it was a lot for both parents and like teenagers that I would interact with. It's sort of like, oh, this is very different to my experience of what normal family structure is. Um, but yeah, so I started being home educated when I was 9 or 10, and I guess being in that kind of transitory phase where you're kind of learning who you are, it was interesting. My brother basically the reason that we started home educating was partly due to seeing your own family's kind of experience and that going so well. And my older brother Ben, he was not having a super great time in school. He is really really bright and was really bright at the time, but also has mild dyspraxia. So basically he had the answers to things, but his hands took much longer to write out the answers than he had in his brain. So he was kind of reading things that he knew really well and whatever.
It was terribly
Uh,
frustrating
and
for
then
him, I remember. Yeah. Very
yeah, so
frustrating.
he found school very frustrating in that manner, and the kind of it was beautiful, lovely Gael school that we're in, but just the whole structure, it wasn't a result of the school; it was just a result of the school system that there wasn't the flexibility to deal with that difference in kind of how his brain was working. So he begged and begged and begged my dad to let him be home educated because he'd seen the example of your family, like you were really the only home educators that we knew at the time, and he saw it working so well there, and he just really wanted to have part of that. And so eventually my dad took the plunge and home educated him for a year, and then the year after um posited it to me and my sister and said, it's totally up to you if you want to. We'll try it for a year. It's up to you even if you want to do it for the year, and then we'll revisit it. And it just ended up working really really well. We went for it and really flourished in it. Like I was always super arty, and so the opportunity to really just spend loads of time really focusing in on that was incredible for me. So yeah, no, I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I can remember when you were small, um, well, not small, but maybe a, 11, 12, and some of the drawings that you would give us on cards or whatever. And I remember remarking to your parents how impressed I was at the detail, and them saying, you know, it's nothing to Robyn to spend 6 hours getting a drawing right. And like the idea that as quite a young person, you were focusing on something to that degree. Like, I think for parents watching this now, the idea that all their child does is draw, or all their child does is play Lego, or all their child does is paint games workshop figures, that's kind of scary to conventionally educated adults and parents, because we're so used to 40 minutes of maths, 40 minutes of English, 40 minutes of, as a timetable thing. So I know your dad was one of the most creative people I have ever seen in terms of preparing lessons for people, and like, I would say burning the midnight oil,
Oh yeah.
deciding how to, I can remember some science structures he was making with, do you know what I'm talking about? The polystyrene balls and the,
Yeah. So we would make figurines of how atoms worked out. Yeah, with the protons and electrons and everything, and we had a bunch of them stacked up on top of our cupboards at a certain point. Yeah, like he wasn't formally taught as a teacher. He had a kind of a science background, so we did do a lot of we ended up doing a lot of kind of science test subject type things in the kitchen and whatever. But he would say himself that like he ended up learning just as much as we did alongside us, that there was almost a relearning for him in a lot of things. Like with history, there were loads of things where he, like you said, he just absolutely like delved into everything that we were learning. And so he said that he was he was relearning stuff that he didn't get the first time around when he was educated. The second time around, by teaching us, he actually was like getting it way more.
I think
Which
people
is,
say that by, sorry for interrupting, by the fact
no,
that
go
you
for it.
have to, the fact that you have to explain something to somebody means your grasp of it has to be better than what you can, dare I say, pass a test at the end of the week with.
Exactly, yeah. And so yeah, so we did have like, we had maybe more structure than a lot of home educated families in Ireland would have, in that like we would sit down, we would do maths, or we would do history. But that thing you were saying about the focus of like, we would take the time that we wanted to take with the subject that we were focused in. So if we were doing history and we were looking at a particular period of time, we could take a day or we could take the week and just like really hone in on that, which was great, because I think kids often do have that almost like obsessive quality where you get really into space, or you get really into dinosaurs, and you just want to know all about that thing and like eat it up. And so to have the flexibility to actually just like dig into that was really fun and really interesting and great. But yeah, and my dad, like, he is an incredibly hardworking and incredibly humble man. So if he sees this thing, I'm sure he'll not be impressed with what I'm saying. But
That's
he
okay.
put
Let's celebrate parents at home. I think that's a good subtext to this.
yeah,
But
but he
also, one thing I was struck by, am I right in thinking that is there 9 years between the oldest and youngest of the four of you guys?
there is,
Um,
yeah, 8 or 9, yeah.
yeah, and I think that while your dad would have been focusing, we'll say, on science that he felt the older ones of you really needed to learn, younger people were always involved as well. Like, he was able to make things relevant to that age span. Like, I one of the many misapprehensions that people who are new to home education have is that you have to focus rigidly on what 8-year-olds in a class situation are doing. And I think that's been very difficult for parents who are being who are doing virtual schooling now. They're still trying to tick all the boxes that the teacher is sending out. And I think it's been incredibly difficult for people doing that. But the idea, I know I looked at Montessori's ideas about education at one stage, and she would have children in the same room who are 3 years. So she groups the 3 to 6s together, the 6 to 9s together, the 9 to 12s, because of the learning that happens in that age range. And what you're saying about delving for a long time into a small area. I think Steiner schools would do that. So they seem to have like, um, if it's June now and we're going to look at, I don't know, flowers and fruits that are coming into season at this stage, or birds who are building their nests, and we just focus really hard on what animals and what birds are actually reproducing at this time of year. And so we get our literacy, our numeracy, our geography, our history, all through looking at, well, this swallow actually came from Africa. Where's Africa? And that leads on to a whole chain of
Yeah,
learning, I guess.
the train. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. And so the youngest, at the time, Matthias, we really, like, I saw him really growing through seeing what we were doing as well. Like, he would get really excited and interested and want to be involved in the things that we were doing, that really like pushed him forward as well, I often saw. Yeah, like at kind of 5, we'd be studying the nucleus in a cell, and Matthias would be like, I want to see the nucleus as well, and so um I absolutely, and I think it's a broader thing as well, which is kind of something that I've seen with a lot of home educated kids, is that there is a real, that lack of rigidity in education then spans out to your lack of rigidity in socialization as well, in that we were all really, really good friends as siblings all the way up, even though there was that kind of age gap, and then our friends were as diversely kind of aged as we were, if not more so. Like the 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 span of ages was wide between people that we were having, really great friendships with, and interactions with, and also adults as well were, like, I think a little bit less intimidating, maybe because you didn't have that sort of authoritative figure, because it's your dad who's teaching you. He's not seen as kind of like a teacher figure. So then when other people kind of ask you questions about education, it 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 seems less like they're kind of putting you on trial, and so you can often have very relaxed conversations with adults. I've seen a lot of home educated kids, and I certainly found it myself. That I was faster to engage in conversations with adults than a lot of my peers who were in school at the same time. Um,
That's a really
and
important point too. I think if the child or young person feels they're not being put on the spot and nobody's actually quizzing them, I'm just, when you're talking, I'm remembering um my granny's brother, Canon Nicholas Redmond, and how when you'd visit his housekeeper would make you the most amazing food. Oh my God, we were always stuffed in there. But along with getting your sandwiches and cake, you were also getting quizzed on furlongs and miles and yards and things. And, and
yeah,
I actually remember dreading going to his house because I felt he was going to put me on the spot about something, rather than I think holding on to your innate curiosity and seeing adults as your learning companions rather than as the source of all information means that
mm,
everybody in the conversation is free to say, actually, I don't know. Let's look that up. Or maybe Auntie Mary knows more about that and we'll ask her. Or finding the information in a way that you're not afraid to say, I don't know. I think that's,
yeah, absolutely. And that was something that was really intrinsic to the way both of my parents raised me as well, was that, like, the the question was never a dangerous thing, like having a question that didn't necessarily have a super quick answer. That was actually an opportunity then for both of us to go, okay, well, let's look at our large library of books inside our house. It's often commented on that we have more bookshelves than walls in our house. But it's like, that's not a defeat to not have the answer as a parent. It's actually an opportunity for you to learn alongside your kid. And so that could often be the avenue to actually looking into something in a greater degree than if you just had the answer to start with as well. And so that was great as well. Like, as a kid, even before I was at home educated, the way that my parents raised me was really that questions are great, and the more the better. And
Yeah, I can remember, like, your home is one where like information flows freely, and and questions can lead down some very strange back alleys. You can end up talking about something utterly which seems disconnected. I've always thought of intelligence as being about making connections and the ability to make connections. If I needed to have a shorthand kind of a definition for it, And do you want to talk a bit then about how, so you didn't do a junior cert, you didn't do a leaving cert. So what did you do in order to access your degree?
yeah, so I we've been talking about, I was drawing from when I was very young, and I really got into it in a big way once I started home education, and it was always through making stuff for other people, and the cards and the gifts of art, and I just absolutely love this, and so I think when I was 16, um Eddie, your late husband, wonderfully invited me to this kind of structured art course that was once a week, and it was learning how to kind of classically draw the same way that kind of the masters during the Renaissance would have learned, with kind of busts and structured layouts and stuff, and
Yeah.
I absolutely love this. Sorry, what was that?
No, just the figures, and that the way that Leonardo and Michelangelo, we assume, learned to draw and to sculpt.
Yes, exactly. That really like classical, beautiful way. And so that was when I started kind of formally learning. And that was once a week. And really enjoyed that. I was by far the youngest person in the class. Most of the people were kind of people in their 30s who were taking a class in the evening to kind of relax after work, and so I was this little 16-year-old who was very enthusiastic. And I loved that. I did that for 2 years alongside uh, my home education, until I was 17, and then when I was 17, uh, with that kind of work, and my own personal work that I'm doing up to that point, I applied to do a portfolio course, which I did in Stillorgan, further education college, and so I did a 1 year kind of like foundation art course. So I got to do everything. I did ceramics, I did paper cutouts, I did life drawing for the first time, so like drawing a model from life. I was did a bit of photography, and then drawing and painting as well, and it was just so fun. Like I'm the kind of person who, like, once I get into something, I'll squeeze it for all that it's worth. And so the opportunity to try all of these different things was just very exciting. And I just thoroughly, like, I didn't know, I knew I wanted to do something art based. I didn't know what it was. And so this was an opportunity to just try a bunch of different things and really, like, just get my hands into it. And I ended up absolutely loving that year, and just really enjoying getting to try all these different things that I hadn't tried before, because I was basically pencil and paper, or pen and ink up until that point, and so trying all these different mediums was thoroughly exciting. And then at the end of that year, I applied based on that portfolio to a bunch of different art courses, and was still weighing up my options about several different courses. I was thinking maybe kind of visual communications or graphic design type stuff, and I went to visit IADT in Dunleary, which is a kind of an art design college, and I went into the animation room for the animation course, and just fell in love with that room. And just there was art everywhere, and people making, and little, like, the desks, people's desks, there was little scribbles kind of all around them, and people's favorite art just like covering the room. And it just, like, my heart was just like, yeah, this is where I want to be. And so I I applied there with my first preference on my CAO, and yeah, I did an interview and I got in with full marks. I got full distinctions on the FETAC course, so kind of, and then full marks on the portfolio and IDT as well. So and I think that year had been the marks had gone up as well. So
that course is highly sought after. That was, yeah, fair play
yeah.
to
So you
you for
kind of
getting in.
needed to get those full marks in order to get in. So I was very lucky in that regard. It was a very coveted place with that course. But and yeah, so I did that 4-year course, and that was really a dream. And I think it's funny because I think as a home educated person, you can often feel like you're the kind of advocate for other home educated kids, and so it means you put in that extra bit of effort because you want to kind of prove yourself as a home educator in a room of non-home educators. But the really nice thing about that course was that everybody had kind of been the other person, you know, everybody had been like the art kid or the weird ones sketching kind of in the corner of their notes when they should have been focusing on their studies or whatever in the class. And so it was great because I was kind of in a room of other people who had always been a bit different in that way as well, and so it felt very at home.
So you really felt
Which
you
is great.
belonged in that course.
Absolutely, yeah. And
Just
yeah,
just what is the actual name of the degree that you got, Robyn?
I'm pretty sure it's literally just. I'm pretty sure it's literally just called an animation. It's animation and IDT, and it's 4-year
It's an
BA.
animation degree, okay.
And
And do you want to talk a little bit about the final year project you did and the success of that? I need you to blow your own trumpet here.
sorry, I just missed that last bit there.
Yeah, it's saying my connection's unstable. Hope people are getting this. Yeah, the end of year project you did, your film, and the success you've had with that.
Yeah, so in the last year of that course, there's basically 2 streams. You either kind of write, direct, and create your own film, or else you take a kind of collaborative role on somebody else's project who is running a project. So I decided to direct a film for that year, which was a big step for me because I'd often been the kind of person who, like, a lot of the art that I made was to kind of give something to other people or please other people, and I'm a very kind of people pleasing person. So to kind of go, no, I'm going to make this thing and it's going to be my thing and my direction was a big step for me. And so I went for it anyway. And it was a wonderful. I think one of my favorite years of my life was just making that film for a year. And if you talk about 6 hours, I spent 9 months on what ended up being a 6-minute project. That's how long animation takes. So
the dedication is incredible, yeah, and the
you
attention to
really,
detail.
absolutely, you have to really love it to put in the amount of time that you get for the output. But it's totally worth it. It's totally enjoyable. And so yeah, and it is basically, once you're finished that, you have your film that you've made, if you've managed to get through the 9 months with the finished product at the end, which I was very lucky. I had a great team and we did, and it was 6 minutes long. And so then I submitted that to a bunch of festivals. I spent kind of 2 weeks sending it away to anyone who would have it, and it did really well. It screened in, I think, 4 or 5 continents. It screened France, Spain, Greece, Brazil, Taiwan, South Korea.
Wow.
I actually got to go over to Greece for one of the festivals. They paid for me to go visit one of the little islands and see it over there, which was great. It was my first solo travel ever, and that was
Fantastic.
exciting and yeah. And so yeah, it opened up a load of cool opportunities. Actually, just getting it um, sent around the world. And then it's won 4 awards as well, 3 in Ireland, and then one in a little festival in, I think, Alabama somewhere. um, yeah.
That is
So
fantastic, Robyn. I mean, I hope it, like, I hope some of the blood, sweat, and tears that you put in over the 9 months felt like it had been properly, recompensed or recognized by winning those awards.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, making the thing in and of itself felt like reward enough for me. So every single time I got into another place, it was like, oh, this is like an even better bonus. And the way that the festival system works as well, it's kind of that you submit to a bunch of places, and then they're all of their dates are different, and so it's kind of a tiered process of finding out whether you've got in or not. And so it's been a year now, and it's still getting into places. And so it's this kind of repeating kind of gift that I every so often I'll get into another one. It'll be like, oh yeah.
That is just
um
fantastic. And do you want to tell people a bit about the job that you're doing at the moment? So how long is it since you graduated?
So I graduated November of last year, November 2019, and like really in May, but then like the official graduation November. And I was great. I my job lined up so well that I got my job the day before graduating, which was a very nice
Wow.
feeling. But yeah, I've been
Fantastic
working
timing. Yeah.
in yeah, it was really cool. But I was working, yeah, so I'm working in HMH, which is a learning company, and I'm basically making educational videos for kids. So continuing on the educational path, and it's great. So it's animating and designing, and it's a different challenge every single day, and I'm just learning a tremendous amount every day from people who know a lot more than me. And yeah, it's a whole other environment of learning as well, because it's kind of time sensitive and stuff like that, and so you got to work on your feet and learn on your feet. And yeah, it's great. It's a lovely team as well. And
So it
yeah, I
sounds
kind
to
of
me like you've found a full-time employment in your passion, in your field of passion. Would that be
quickly, so
a
many
true
people,
summary?
yeah, so many people when they found out that I'd gotten my first job and that it was an animation and design job were like, oh yeah, I mean, I thought it was great when you were doing that animation course, but I kind of didn't think that you get a job in it. I kind of thought that it was kind of like, oh great. And loads of people were just delighted for me because it was so nice to see somebody doing a creative thing and then instantly getting into employment immediately afterwards. But it's not as like unachievable as a lot of people think it might be. I think a lot of people are very afraid when they hear kind of art based. They think it's art based means not job focused, or that there's not going to be jobs in it. But actually, like, that industry is booming in Ireland, like particularly when we look at like film and animation. It's really having a big deal and a big push at the moment. So there is lots of employment available if you put in the work.
That is so reassuring for people to hear that actually the thing you're passionate about, the thing that you personally are passionate about, but if people follow their passions, that actually they can feed themselves out of that. That's
Yeah. It
that's a great
sounds like
take home.
it sounds like too good to be true, really. Like, I go to work and I get to, design characters and, you know, paint things and draw things, and that I get paid for that. Like, I'm still kind of pinching myself if that's the case, but that's excellent.
That's just so fantastic, Robyn. And I think, well, I've really enjoyed the catch up and the chat with you. And I think that what you've said will be very um, reassuring to people to know that a child. I heard about somebody recently who was offered a job. Um, they've been home educated for most of their lives, and they are actually cracked about computer development and software development and that kind of thing. And they're very good in their field because they spent all their childhood on the computer. And they were offered a job, and they conducted the bit I really love is the story from the mum that the young man was offered his job during an interview while he was actually playing a game during the interview.
Wow.
So, you know, who says guys can't multitask? You know, we got to knock that stereotype. Is there anything else you want to say while we're wrapping up?
Yeah, I guess just like if you have a kid who is really into something that's a little bit different, to kind of trust that and go with it, and kind of see where they lead you a bit, because when people have those kind of focuses, it actually it's something to be really enjoyed and appreciated, because so many things that we do now, we do them because we're obligated to do them, or we do them because we have to do them. And so somebody choosing to do something because they're really passionate about it is actually a really wonderful thing, and a thing to be treasured and cultivated. So I guess if you're seeing, you know, your child and they have that kind of passion or that interest, that's something really good, and it's something that should be treasured, you know.
Encourage and nurture. Yeah, don't be saying, yeah, art's grand, but you'll never make a living out of that. Like, was it Rembrandt had some of his paintings were given away to the bread man, to the baker, because they couldn't, you know. our history is littered with people we treasure now who, you know, they couldn't feed their own families from their art. So yeah, I'm glad that's changed.
Yeah, I know we're in a time now where actually those kind of things are viable, you know, job prospects, and so that's something that's pretty cool about this time of the world or time period. And so yeah, it's a real privilege to be where I'm at.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much for chatting to us today, Robyn. Great to chat to you.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm gonna